Hi everyone, welcome to Dynamic Modeling of Cities. You're with Max. In this series of how-tos, I will explain my workflow on how to achieve an analysis like this. This particular one was put together using Revit and then linked into 3ds Max and rendered using V-Ray. First, just a quick look at this linked file from Revit into 3ds Max. I just wanted to quickly explain why we need to clean up our model before it comes into 3ds Max. When you link in, it's going to set up its own layer structure. And these are going to be categorized in different ways. Coming from Revit gives you the option to also categorize not in just materials like I have, but also in family types. The reason I've chosen materials is so I can quickly select all the glass at once and apply a new V-Ray material that can be rendered correctly. The other thing to be mindful is that some components in Revit are actually made up of more than one material. So this is where I have to clean up a little bit so I don't get three different kinds of ceilings that are made up of aluminium and studs and gypsum wallboard. So basically, when you're modeling Revit, you want to use as much generic modeling as you can, but this will really help to reduce your file size and really import or link a really lean model really quickly. I'd also like to point out the benefit of linking into 3ds Max is this gives us the option to reload our model and update it. To do that, I would simply go File, Reference, Manage Links, and you'll see here under the File tabs, I've got that linked file directory right here. The little red flag is going to indicate that there's already some changes been made to that Revit file and that our 3ds Max file is ready to be updated. You can simply click Reload. So I'm just going to quickly jump into this Revit project that I've got open here. You can see here they've gone through a few different series of models, some precedents and some iterations. And basically what we want is just to import this model by itself. Now there's a really quick way to actually export this as a 3D model and also purge all the family types and anything that was unuseful from the file. I'm going to use a trick here where I'm going to use a new sheet. I'm going to select None. This will bring me to the new sheet. I'm just going to rename this Export Clean 3D. And then in my views, I'm going to go to my default 3D view. I'm going to duplicate that. I'm going to rename it. I'm going to give it a version number as well. So now that I've got this model, what I need to do is hide all these other stuff. So I'm just going to select all with the marquee. I'm going to click in EH, stands for element hide. So you can see here that everything has been hidden. It's in pink. The second thing I'm going to do is just turn on my viewport there, and I'm just going to make this really small just to crop in the 3D model that we want. Okay. So now that I've got that, I can go to my sheet. You'll see that there's no sheet there because we're not actually using it as a sheet, we're using it as an export vessel. And I'm just going to drag that view onto the sheet. Zoom in, and I'm going to turn off that title. Okay, so from here I'm going to do a save as. So I'm going to right click on this export clean 3D on this sheet, and I'm going to go save to new file. This will take roughly a minute and a half just to copy all the elements into a new file. The benefits of this is that it purges all the families that you aren't using, all the stuff that isn't relevant to that model, like sheets and views and all that kind of stuff will be just saved into one file and it will just be the model. So all you need to do here is just save it to your desired location. I'm just overwriting one that I did earlier. So I'm just going to open that file there. I'm just going to check the 3D, make sure I got everything. There's just a few model lines here, but that's fine. But you'll see that most of it, if not all of it, is now empty. Next thing I'm going to do is actually move all this stuff closer to the origin point. I'm just going to move and snap to this point. So some of my ceiling patterns have changed. Sometimes you can restore all on your groups. And that should fix them up. Okay, once we're in here, there's a few things I want to fix up. As stated before in 3ds Max, you'll notice that the layering tree has included more materials than we need. And this is because I've used a compound ceiling. So if you were to look inside the compound ceiling structure, you'll see that there's two materials that it's made up of. We don't necessarily need that or want that for quick analysis from 3ds Max. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select one and click select all instances visible in view. And I'm going to just change that to a basic ceiling. So the basic ceiling can only have one material attributed to it. So I'm just going to look for a ceiling one. Let's take the transparency off that. So now that the ceiling's on basic, I might just check a few other elements. These walls have a generic 90 frame with lining on both sides. So if I go into there, I can see here that they've actually got a 90mm stud and they've got 10mm of plus on either side. So the total thickness is actually 110mm. So there's two things I can do here. I can either select all and change to 110 generic one, which I don't have. So I can either go edit type, duplicate, and just go generic 110. You can delete these and make that 110. This might throw a few group errors. So with the group errors, you might just have to press unjoin and ungroup, which is not really ideal. So if I go back, the other thing I can do is actually just edit this directly. I might just delete that family type and rename the wall here. So by altering that wall type itself and just editing its properties, it's not going to throw you any group errors, and they're going to remain as groups, which is handy if you want to make changes later in this Revit model. I'm going to do the same thing to this type here. So now I know most of my types have probably been reduced. We can check the floor as well. Generic floor is just 500mm. Cool. So I can save that. So this model here was the one that I had pre-linked into 3ds Max, and you can clearly see that it's been updated. So I'll just run you through that update again. Go File, Reference, Manage Links, Update, and Reload. So when this window pops up, we just want to untick lights, daylight system, and cameras, and we want to keep the materials on so that when they update, in the model updates, it keeps all the changes that I made to those materials earlier. Press OK. Now that should import pretty quickly because we've got rid of all that crap and we've cleaned up the model quite well. We can just close that now, and you can see there that the model has loaded back in. Now, I've used the object properties here to see through the ceiling. I've also kept it renderable, but I've turned off everything except for cast shadows. That way we can render through the floor plan and see the floor and the daylight hitting the floor. So I've just opened up a new 3ds Max file. Just going to enlarge this window here just to show you how to import a file from scratch. I'm going to go File, Import, Link Revit. Find your way to your model. Select the model that you want and click Open, and select the view that you want. So here we've got that option. You can select in by material, category, family type, or as one object or not combined at all. I'm going to use material again and select attach this file. So I had an error when linking into 3ds Max, and that's because the view I selected doesn't actually have anything in it. Okay, so before importing this file, we're just going to make sure that because we've moved it to the center point, you'll go back to the original floor plan view here and you'll see that there's actually nothing there. That's because the section box is ticked. You still can't see it or you zoom way out. You can just double click your mouse wheel and it will zoom back to extent. And we also want to just check our crop region, which is where the which is located where the original file was. So you just have to use these little node points to drag it back up. Okay, I'll just close that, save it. I'm just going to close this file. Good file, import, link Revit. So from here, I'm just going to select that 3D view again. You could probably use that 3D view there, but I think this is just cleaner because we know everything's hidden in that file. It's probably just good practice. You might have a few different versions set up of the same model, but they're cleaner versions of themselves. So you can kind of use this as the link file. You can see here the little red flag's not there because the whole file's up to date. So you can just close that. In the main window, sometimes it imports some of the environment settings. It'll import some cameras and things. We should usually have them ticked off. In this case, you can just delete them, go back to your default shading, viewport background, and change it back to the gradient. So there you have it. That's how you link from Revit into 3ds Max.